Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Sawchuk. You are here with me in my accessible home just outside of Blythe, Ontario. Today, I am in conversation with Jim Close, and we're going to be talking about getting out. So much of the conversation about accessibility. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
So much of the conversation about accessibility is often about getting people into the building, right? You want people to come into your rec center or your restaurant and getting in and out of homes, but it's really getting out that is kind of the more important aspect. Because if you can't get out, you can't get out in an emergency. So Jim and I are going to be talking a little bit about that today. I wanted to tell you first, though, about my personal experience in terms of not being able to get out. And this photo represents a lot, a little bit of frustration on my face, I guess you would say. This is our old house, the farmhouse that I moved back into after rehab. And there was only one accessible entrance or exit, and that was the ramp that we had built. And so this was the secondary exit. If there was an emergency and the front entrance was blocked, then this is the exit that I would have had to use. So it's like not ideal, right? So when we built this house, one of the things in the design that we incorporated was an emergency exit out the bedroom door. And so that's why I'm in the bedroom today, because I wanted to show you that our bedroom goes right out onto the patio. So, it's even locked. What? Don't tell somebody I actually locked the door. So there we go, right out onto the patio. And then if I need to really get away from the house, I can just roll right out onto the grass. And that was an intentional design because of the fear that I lived with the entire time we were in the old house, because if I were by myself and needed to get out, I wouldn't have been able to. So Jim, tell us about some of the experiences that you've had talking with people about getting out of buildings.
Well, actually, let's start residentially, because I don't focus on that a lot. But what you brought up just there is actually, reminded me over the years. I've been doing this 30 years in various aspects of accessible design and aging in place, if you will. But what you've just described is, if you have the ability to design your accessible home like you did, I have come across projects where the architect or designer or even client themselves have forgotten about that, having at least two exits, because if there's a fire at the front or back of the home, side of the home, you need to have choice to get out. It's not, a perfectly designed home, accessible home isn't one that just has the one entrance that you can achieve. I mean, over the years, there's been areas of refuge, but I think we're beyond that. We're going to probably talk about that a little bit further in our conversation. But even at a home, building a deck off a back bedroom as an area of refuge isn't really cool either anymore. So if, when you're starting on a piece of paper and drafting out an accessible home like you were able to do, you did it right. You thought about in, out, and around. So years ago, I used to do a sort of a lecture series with another good friend of mine who's a designer, and we called it, what do we call it? Up, down, and all around. But we didn't really focus back then on in and out as well. I mean, in and out was part of it, but as you pointed out in the early part of the introduction here, is out. When we say getting out today, we're talking about getting out in the event of emergency, no matter what it is.
All situations, right? Like I look at that patio and I used to think, I'll roll out onto the patio and have a morning coffee. And I was thinking of it as a luxury space, but I mean, rarely do I get out that door with my cup of coffee. I'll go out my back door onto the patio, but really it is emergency. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
But you've done a great job in incorporating it in like there's no big, you know, signs pointing to say this is my emergency exit only. It's incorporated into the design of your home.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
residentially, in your situation and in others where you're taking the forethought to redesign the home, you can do that. Where we see trouble is when you're trying to retrofit older homes, and it may not be necessary or possible.
Mhm.
But the focus on, I guess, my work in the last 10 to 12 years, when I really realized that there was a gap. So, I have a strong history of providing and installing commercial lift devices of every way, shape, or form into commercial buildings and public spaces. So we're spending thousands of dollars and a lot of brain power to make buildings accessible.
Mhm.
And then we realized, or I shouldn't say we, it wasn't us that realized it. I mean, this is an industry norm, but a lot of places did not consider what happens when those lifts go down. And either if they're not serviced and they're down, or more importantly, when there is an event. And we typically go to fire as the beacon of, if there's a fire, get out. But a building is evacuated for a number of reasons these days. Gas leaks are a big one, and carbon monoxide, and terrorist threat if you're in a big city. Pandemia, the pandemia world, I call it, we're living in, is really focused a lot on emergency preparedness in general, and this wholly falls into that. So when we're trying to complete the circle of accessibility, or complete the accessibility loop, which I've used in a few interviews as well, is let's make sure that it is closed and there is plans for getting out. Now, whether that's physically installing extra exits, or like our safety chairs with my sign behind me, and we're going to show a bit of that. Is there devices, tools, and training of the personnel to get those individuals with limited mobility out of the building?
So tell me how that works. And I apologize. I know we had talked about uploading the video, but I'm going to put that on my YouTube channel so that people can watch it
Oh,
at their
it's a
leisure.
great video,
I
Julie.
know. I'm sorry. I'm
You're the
sorry.
star. Yeah, no, and it is good, and I hope people who are watching go and look at it, because it really tells the tale. Now that's showing one strategy of having an evacuation chair, and there's North America, Canada in specific. We're probably like a lot of things, accessible and aging in place, and sort of universal design. We're kind of behind the curve when it comes to Northern Europe, specifically Scandinavia. So that's where a lot of these products come from, and the best practices are followed over there. So these products come from there, and it's just we have to now bring them forward to say that they exist. So it isn't something that was just invented recently. It's things that are there. They're simple to use in the most part, but that's one. The chairs are one. So, sorry, I got off track there a little bit, but
Yeah,
there
talk us
has been
through how they work.
there's been tons of studies on how they work and why they work, and how fast you can get a building out. So that's the number one thing. Is the key is the speed of getting people out of the building. And I guess in relevance to that too, is it's also an injury prevention device. So if you think about it, if there's co-workers in an office space, for example, who get buddied up with someone who needs help, and I should say we in this kind of area, we say persons with limited mobility, and that could be someone like yourself who uses a chair on a daily basis, or it could be someone who's temporarily broken leg, knee
Exactly.
brace, can't make the stairs. They could probably still do the stairs if they want, but their slowness of descent, blocking the stairwell in an emergency, can cause problems for pedestrian
Yeah.
traffic. There's been lots of studies on that as well. So that's one methodology. But the bigger scope, which we won't get into today, is the overall design on fire safety, and that's a whole industry that frankly I'm not an expert in, but what we are, and you and I can view from the accessibility side, is there are things like evacuation chairs, evacuation sleds and slides, and basically awareness that is existing now that isn't grossly expensive, like some of the devices that do get installed or some of the fixtures that do get installed in large projects. It in comparison to the overall budget of something, it's quite minor, and yet it has a huge impact on the overall safety of the building.
So tell me about some of the places that you have been seeing a little bit of pushback in terms of having an evacuation chair, for example.
So, I mean, it's been if I go back to say 2012, 2013, when I started trying to take it on as a sort of one-man advocacy, and I'm not going to say I was the only one. There's people across the country who've done it, but I've hit probably every kind of building, including healthcare, which I'm more familiar with. So obviously started there with long-term care, retirement, hospitals, and other kinds of supportive living. Barriers there, simply money. And I don't think it's going to change after 2020 with the extraordinary costs of PPE and some of the other equipment that these homes had to buy under budget. But and then I hold out hope. We're in Ontario, lots of money now, lots of focus on those type of long-term care and doing renovations and building new buildings. Here's an opportunity just to simply include evacuation plans and devices. So that's one.
Let's just talk about that for a second. Like evacuation chairs in healthcare facilities, for example, when I was in rehab hospital for 3 months on the 4th floor, paralyzed, right? And still not like I couldn't get myself out of my bed. I didn't have the strength, the ability, the knowledge how to do that. I was reliant on a lift for quite a few weeks to get out of bed and into my wheelchair. And then even once I was able to transfer from bed to wheelchair, I wouldn't have been able to get out of the building without using the elevator. And so I often would lie in bed, think, so what happens if there's an emergency? And I talked to the healthcare providers there, and they had a plan, but it certainly didn't involve evacuation chairs. It was some sort of like mattress that they pulled down the stairs or something like that. But the number one step was to close all of the rooms because they have fireproof doors. But that doesn't make me feel very good, right? In terms of, just wait and the fire will burn itself out or something. I don't know.
No, and that's true. And I'm not going to, again, dip my toe into the water of fire safety engineering and fire design in modern buildings specifically, because there are fire breaks and fire security sprinkler systems, all that comes into play. But we're still in a society where there's a ton more older buildings than there are newer buildings. And there's a ton more incidences where those well thought out plans don't happen, and that's why they're called emergencies. That it's I'm not going to downplay it, but that's the unforeseen happens. Nobody could have anticipated this COVID-19, and not to compare it, but I've said a couple times in a couple interviews is the thing about evacuations of buildings, including hospitals, they happen regularly. They may not make the news, most of them do, but they do happen regularly. If you follow like I do, there's 1 or 2 a week across Canada where a building has to be evacuated. There was one just recently last week in Toronto, where one of the hotels has been used as a COVID shelter for some, and I don't know if you read it. We should post it. Actually, we'll find the article. But there was a woman that was trapped up there for a long time. There was a fire in between her and the bottom, and I have to reach out to that building management to say, do you want to talk? Because but it happened. I guess my point is that they do happen. It's not unforeseen. It does happen, and this is why there has to be a little bit more awareness. This is why we've launched a project we call Everybody Out. We're using the Canadian Spinal Cord Research Organization to help with that, getting the word out. So they're another a charity that looks for the cure for spinal paralysis, but they are also a very strong community-centered charity, and
Mhm.
we believe using their platforms as long as and others that will meet along the way, just at least get the word out, and proceeds from some of our sales will go back into the charity.
And so much of that awareness piece addresses the the first most common question I get is how much is it going to cost? And then the second most common, not a question, but a comment that I get is, I never thought of that before. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
sure, we have areas of refuge, and that's where Julie's going to sit until the fire people can come and haul her out of the building. But how does Julie feel about that? How do people with disabilities who can't get out of the building, how does that make them feel? And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that's why we're partnering. I spent a number of years doing it myself as able-bodied. My messaging goes so far, but I'm not even going to put words in your mouth, Julie, on how you would feel. I can only imagine. And people might say, no, it's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. But I mean, again,
I also never
these
thought
things.
I'd get hit by a car, right? So
There you go. What better example than that? So,
yeah.
things happen, and so for the cost, the evacuation slides are a few $100s. They're not necessarily the best, and I'll explain in a minute. But you're under $2,000 for an evacuation chair. You need multiple in big buildings. You should have one in each stairwell, kind of thing. But at the very least, start with one.
Right.
And where we've had I guess commercial success is businesses that have employed someone such as yourself who happen to be in a chair or have that limited mobility. They would then, in order to place them into an employment setting, would have a evacuation chair just automatically part of the employment standard.
Right.
So that so that's another angle that we take through HR, human rights, and employment strategies. That's certainly a methodology of getting the word out. But again, that becomes is that for that one person, it really should be encompassing the whole building.
So talk about the whole building then, right? In terms of staff training, how, I'm sure there are people that are out there watching and listening right now that are thinking, how complicated are these devices and how much specialized training is needed?
Yeah.
And can I rely on my staff to operate them? And I've used them with you, so I know the answer to this question, but I want you to talk about it
I was going to say, I thought you were going to caveat that with saying, and if you can use it, anybody can use it, which I will say, yeah, if I can use it, anyone can use it. They're typically classified. There's what EMS and ambulance and fire. They have a much more robust chairs. We sell those too, but they use them on a daily basis because they're transporting injured people.
Mm-hmm.
What the category that we would sell into a public space is really called civilian chairs, and they're designed to be simple. They're designed to be you can literally if I was in a building with you and we found ourselves in a situation and I had never seen one before, I could quickly look at the back of the chair and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it's dumbed down. It's very simple to use, and you've witnessed it. Right. So and that's kind of twofold. It's so that if there was a lack of training or nobody had training, you could figure it out. But it's also for the speed of deployment, because you don't want to be fiddling around and playing with a whole bunch of knobs and levers and switches and locks. Locks. And everyone's anyone who's a parent, trying to unfold the baby at the first time and then trying to get it back together. It's easier than baby stroller. At least the engineers figured that part out. They were probably frustrated dads and moms trying to, okay, we got to make this easy. So in terms of training is important. There's a host of ways to do it, online. If we're talking about remote areas where we're able to do hands-on training, we typically would train the trainer, and then it gets part of their routine. So commercial buildings, they will have to do fire drills as if they're on multi-floors, and their fire wardens would take responsibility. There's lots of online resource and video, which is we just keep creating new stuff. Like that's why we made the video with you.
Yep.
And the knowledge just has to be. Does it have to be signed off? There will be best practices by either companies or facilities to look at that, but it's very, very easy. And in the case of, like I said, I've been doing it for so long, there's places in northern Alberta that I can think of where nobody's going to get there to train them for 5 minutes, because that's literally, well, you spend a little bit more time, but after 5 minutes people go, yeah, I get it. Like so it's important, but the dissemination of knowledge is pretty quick.
Yeah, but it's not a 2-day training course that people have to have a certificate in. It's very strict.
I should have probably had an example of what to compare it to, but it's not. It's been designed to work quickly, easily, and safely. So the one thing I was going to say is, especially when it came to healthcare, where the regulations are a little bit stronger, and they're concerned about the staff, you can view it as an injury prevention device. So when you talked about your history and your experience, yes, you would have to get out of the building, and if they dragged you on the mattress, I've done that physically with people, and it's not easy. And the risk of injury to the orderlies, the PSWs, the nurses, doctors, even when they have to get involved, is great. The stairs, I've spent my career on and off stairs, and they're dangerous. That's why there's so many different ways of trying to not use the stairs. But when you have to use the stairs, because people got to remember, even if you're in a hospital, the elevators are shut down. You have to use the stairs, and that's again from fire safety engineering purposes. And the elevators are used for first responders, or you cannot shuttle people down fast enough in an elevator in a real emergency. In Canada, they're starting to design some of those super skyscrapers with fire evacuation elevators only, but we don't see it here very much. Excuse me.
So we're kind of leaving people hanging in terms of what all this looks like, which means I guess you're just going to have to go to my YouTube channel and look up the video yourself.
Yes.
Cliffhanger. There's one other thing that I want to talk to you about, though, if you have a few more minutes. My parents live in a bungalow, and that's in a retirement community. And even though it's a retirement community, every house has a basement, and every house has 4 or 5 steps up to the front door. And as people age, their joints start to not be very comfortable in their activity. And my dad's at that point where he might be getting on the list to get a hip replacement. But in the meantime, he still likes to go up and down to the basement. That's where his workshop is. He does his airplane modeling down there. And I know you have been talking to them about setting up something that will help get up and down the stairs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's a nice little setup, because I didn't know we were going to talk about that, but sure. So Live Easy Inc. has the safety chairs and the evacuation products that we just spent the last bit talking about. We're also bringing a product from Norway called Assist Step, which is essentially a moving handle. Again, we're going to have to pantomime this because we're not prepared, but it's on my YouTube channel, on Live Easy Inc. on YouTube. Lots of videos there, and it's for guys and gals like your dad who want to remain active but still have that a little bit of weariness of stairs. And quite frankly, my mom should have one, and she probably, I gotta talk her into it. That's the big conversation of people in our generation is making sure the parents understand, because I just left the segment of the evacuation chairs, talk about the safety of the staff. Because falling, I mean, the whole thing that we're talking about is accessible design, because but you could boil it down to say we're trying to avoid people from falling. Yeah. In whatever aspect. So the Assist Step is like I said, a moving handle that will get fastened, and it's people are going to automatically compare it to a stair lift, which for the past 20 years has been marketed to that age category, and we're by no means going after that mark. We want to see people, because there are again, documented health record or health studies to show that obviously the more active you are, even walking stairs, the better, the more healthy you stay. And your dad's obviously an example of that. So
Yeah.
this just helps to stabilize the people, gives them that confidence. If they stumble, the railing's going to catch them and they're going to hold on. They do have to have still upper body strength to hold on to it. But we just yesterday installed one in a physio clinic in Midland, Ontario, because they're setting up a fall assessment center.
Right.
And the OTs and PTs that have worked there are quite excited about being able to show more people up there. So we've done a few. We're going to do your dad's soon when they're ready.
Yep.
And it's a really neat product.
Well, and it has that, it's the safety thing, but it's also the added benefit of them being able to stay in their home for longer, right? Because they can still navigate safely between floors. And for us, their kids, that provides a lot of comfort to us because we know that they have what they need to stay safe and stay in their home, because that's where they want to be. And we want them to be there for as long as they can. And that leads to what I'm talking about next week. And Jim, I hope you'll come and watch next week, because the conversation I'm going to have next week is with a friend of mine, Charlene, and we're going to talk about some features in the bathroom that help people stay in their home for longer, because it means that they can look after their own personal care. And for those of you that have heard about my new book, Building Better Bathrooms, that is one of the things that we talk about, is those uncomfortable conversations that often are involved in terms of what your bathroom is going to be set up like, so that you can do what you need to do in the bathroom independently. So that is next week. I hope you will join me at 1:00 again, or I hope you will follow up and watch online. Jim, thank you so very much for being with us here today. I know you and I are going to have a lot more to talk about down the road.
Sure.
You've got some
Anytime.
other projects that you're cooking up, and I'm excited to be a part of those. Jim has his own YouTube. And Jim, can you tell us how people can get in touch with you?
Well, it's liveeasyinc.com is website. Jim at liveeasyinc.com is probably the best through email. Follow me on LinkedIn. We do have a Facebook channel. We're try to be very active there, and as much as we can put up there as good edible content we put up there.
Excellent. And you can get a hold of me at my website, Julie. My email is julie@juliesawchuk.ca. Please follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more videos. I guess we're going to do this once a week. So thanks for joining me this
great.
week, Jim. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Have a good weekend.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.